Welcome to Goldfish on Games, where today I'm going to be answering the question that I do get asked quite often. It's not about the beard, it's how I capture all this hardware. And I think the best place to start is with the capture card that I use. My personal one is the StarTech.com USB 3 HD cap, and it has 3 connectors on the front. One that takes various analog video formats like composite and S-video. The second is a DVI port that will also take VGA with a converter, and it's also got a HDMI port. And it all connects to the computer via USB 3. If you do buy a capture card, you should try and get at least a USB 3 one, as 2 isn't fast enough to let you play the captured footage in real time. There is some serious lag to it. Though some of them do have a pass-through option, which will forward the video onto another port so it can be shown on another screen, but that can add additional complications into the mix as well. So for a machine like the N64, this would be all I'd really need, as I can connect it via S-video or composite. And I get decent enough quality from both. But it's not always possible to go straight to the capture card. If the cable ends with a SCART connector, or if the results aren't as good as you might hope, then you might have to add something else into the chain. In keeping with composite and S-video, I would use this box. It doesn't have any real branding on it, and I've been told there's a ton of variations all using the same shell, so it's a bit of a lottery if you get a good one, but I will say this one has been very good to me. It handles most video formats as long as it's SCART, and it upscales them relatively well. Now it's not perfect, it does add a bit of lag into the system, and it's not always fully correct with fast scrolling, and the scaling isn't the best. But it was much better than the HD TV I was using before I got the CRT. But thankfully it does give you a few options of what resolution you want to push it to, so you just have to keep tapping the buttons till you get something that works for you. And amazingly, it actually supports both PAL and NTSC, so that's pretty nice. But if we're using a machine like the Amiga, Mega Drive or even the SNES, then we have another option, as all of these have RGB video out. So I would use the OSSC. Now this is one of the earlier units, as you can see it's got the DVI out and it just passes the audio on. But despite the slightly battered look, thank you cat, it does work really great and it's still getting some amazing firmware updates that's making it even better. Now its inputs are SCART, VGA and component. Now it is important to mention the SCART socket will only work with RGB video sources. It does not accept S-video or composite or anything else, which is why I still have to keep that other box around. And this will only scale in whole numbers. It's either 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5. For example, if the video source was 320 by 240, it would output 320 by 240, 640 by 480, 960 by 720, 1280 by 960, or 1600 by 1200, though the last one can be changed to be 1920 by 1080 in one of the options, as not all capture cards or HD TVs particularly like that resolution. So each pixel is just repeated a set number of times, which completely eliminates uneven scaling, and it helps to give a much larger and cleaner image to the capture card for it to work with. Now thankfully this adds very little lag, it has nice smooth scrolling, and it only does integer scaling so the output should not be too blurry. But it is based on the quality of the inputs coming into it, but you can still get stuff like the jail bars from the Mega Drive if the output hasn't been fixed up. This is all great for progressive video because it's quite basic, but for interleaved video things get a little bit more fiddly, as there's a number of methods to produce a stable image. The OSSC itself has its own very basic bob filter, which can look a little bit flickery. Or it can be passed on to the capture card to handle, which gives us a few more options. or even you can pass it on to the capture software to apply its own fixes. Now it mostly comes down to what looks best for the situation. Some are better at low moving scenes and others at faster ones. So you really do have to experiment with the game and the hardware with your setup to get what you think is the best look. And as the OSSC also has VGA input, I will sometimes use this to help capture my PCs. Now this tends to be on a case-by-case basis, mostly based on the resolution and refresh rate of the games. I've had some that the OSSC would refuse to upscale, and other ones that the HD cap would refuse to accept. So it comes down to working out which one will actually work in that situation and which looks best, though the looks is mostly down to preference. The last main format that we have to try and capture is RF, which covers the Atari 2600, my Pong machines and the video pack. For this task it's quite common to find people still using VHS players, as they have an RF tuner and a composite output that would go to the TV, but I'm a little different as I actually use the TV itself. Not to film from, though I do like to do that as well, but for its RF tuner and one of the extra features this set has built in, which has been able to forward the currently viewed channel to one of the SCART sockets. So if you tune it in as normal, you'd then take the output from the TV, put it into the upscaler, then into the capture cards, which we can see from the raw capture isn't incredible, but then it is 3 devices deep to get this capture. But we can fix some of this up with the capture software. I, like many others, use OBS, and I have a few scenes set up with the device. Now you might need to switch settings back and forth to get the card to recognise what resolution it should currently be outputting, but once it's stable, you should be fine. Now I do tend to apply some filters to the capture. The scaling and aspect ratio is good for making sure the right aspect ratio is being used, because the scalers can mess around with this a little bit. You can also try a few different scaling options to see what looks best for the game. And possibly the most important bit I find is the colour correction. Now the raw video tends to be a little bit washed out, as normally your TV will apply its own settings to add some of this back in. So we have to do it ourselves, and how much and of what type of correction depends on the console and the game. Normally adding a bit of contrast will help, and then a bit of gamma to put it all up. Though you might need to mess around a bit with the hue and saturation to make it look exactly as you want. I would then try and crop out as much of the dead space around the game as possible. For something that's using composite or RF, you might need to apply a lot more than you might expect. We can make it look a lot nicer by messing around with its contrast and the saturation and the hue to really make it pop. The basics I tend to find is making sure that the blacks look black. From there, everything else should look a little better. And as we can see, I've actually got a lot of filters that I've built up and switched between depending on the console and the game. The other settings that you need to worry about would be the recording options. You could try and match the frame rate to the hardware, which quite often for me means 50 Hz, but also try increasing the bitrate. I use 10,000, which I found to be a nice balance between huge file sizes and its quality. Now one thing I've not mentioned so far is sound. The HD cap does support sound capture, but I found it a little fiddly to get it to work. And I've never had the best results with it. It would just randomly go out of sync or just stop working. So I tend to pipe the audio directly into the computer and then add an audio capture source to OBS. This is an area I'm definitely not an expert on, and is something I'm still trying to get better at. And as a treat, I figured I'll show you how I capture my light gun games, seeing that you really need to use the TV to play the games on. So I use this, a car boot find that I got a few years back. I connect the console to any of the SCART sockets, and then I can use the SCART output to send it to the capture card. This would mean I get a nice clean RGB source if the console supports it. I would then use this set of composite connectors to connect to the TV. So this is actually acting as a splitter. Now the only downside is it doesn't properly split RGB, so there can only be one destination for it to go to, which I always send to the capture card, so you always get the best quality picture, as I can live with composite on the TV. Now this isn't the only or even possibly the best solution for capturing, but it's the one that I've gotten to work quite well for me. I've tried a few different capture cards and some would only accept specific resolutions or others that gave poor quality images. Now I will say that some of what I've mentioned has been a little vague, and that's down to the fact that I'm still learning new processes as I go along, as well as there's some settings that you really just have to experiment with to see what's best. There aren't always hard and fast rules for what will work. You will have to settle on what looks best for you. So if you actually have any advice for me, or if there's anything you'd like to know more about, I'd be happy to hear from you in the comments. I'm hoping that this will help someone with their capture setup, or at least allow them to get their old games running on newer TVs, as the basics are pretty much the same. So until next time, I was the Goldfish, that was hopefully captivating, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thank you for watching my video, I do hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you can let me know down in the comments, or you can use those buttons just below, you know the ones I mean. Or if you're not sure yet, then you can check out 2 other videos that I've done that are on the screen right now. So thank you again, and I hope to see you soon.